when I first joined, the one thing that kind of put me off was how devoted the devotees were to Srila Prabhupada. Because of my personalist conditioning and dark heart, I couldn't understand how could they be so excited about this one person. And I had started reading Bhagavad-gita, and that's where this torchlight of knowledge really lit up my heart. Because previous to that, I had read different books by Ramakrishna, and even though it's very flowery and wordy and thick, there's no real practical application. So reading Bhagavad-gita was like really wonderful like that. And so when we went to see Srila Prabhupada for the first time on Wednesday evenings, the devotees would go up. I hadn't actually joined the temple yet. We piled in a car and went up. And I had these questions since I was a young girl. Basic questions like, who am I? Where am I going? What am I doing here? And even though my father taught theology at Loyola Marymount, he had no answers for me. So it was so amazing that I had these questions, and I thought I'd ask, but when I got there, I was overwhelmed by all the devotees and all the enthusiasm. I didn't have the courage to raise my hand and ask Prabhupada any questions. But when he came out and he gave the lecture, he answered every question in order that I had in my mind. It was so amazing. And I knew there that this is why everyone is so enthusiastic and so devoted to Srila Prabhupada. So that's when it first started. There was a Rath Yatra festival in 1970, and everybody went up when there were festivals like that. Everybody in the temple would just piled into vans and cars, whatever, would go and drove up to San Francisco. And I was pregnant at the time with my first daughter. And there were 7 devotees left here to maintain the deities and take care of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada was flying up Sunday morning. And Saturday evening, because there weren't many devotees, and I couldn't do a lot of different service because I was only like a month before giving birth. And so I was at at Arctic. I was the only one there. And in the old temple room, there were these doors that we'd sometimes leave open for circulation. And somebody threw in a cherry bomb. And it made a very loud noise. And basically, I was fine. I just had fallen down and paid my obeisances, and not sure what was happening, but I knew I was raised with 4 brothers, so it wasn't totally an unusual circumstance. But Srila Prabhupada heard it. He immediately called for Karandar, and he was very concerned about what that was. And he asked, he says, is everybody okay? And Karandar says, well, there was a pregnant woman in the temple room, but she's okay. And Srila Prabhupada was so concerned. I was touched by that. Karandar came and told me. And then the next morning when Srila Prabhupada came to greet the deities, and we greeted the deities, and then he went and sat in his Vyasasan. And we sat on either side of his Vyasasan. I was on the very end. And Srila Prabhupada asked each person individually, how are you doing? Is everything okay? But I actually got overwhelmed. I couldn't believe how compassionate and how truly concerned he was about the devotees that he would ask me. I was so embarrassed that I wanted, literally, I was thinking if I could just crawl under one of these tiles and hide. And so when Srila Prabhupada got to me, he just smiled. It's like he knew I couldn't talk. But then he taught us additional prayers for the Nrsimha prayers. Before we would chant Tavakala Kamala Varenakam, and but then he taught us prayers of, I believe it's Jayadev Goswami, Namaste Narasimhaya. And so he taught us these prayers, and he told us, he said, you chant these every day after Artik, and Krishna will protect you. And through the years, I've realized that Srila Prabhupada was teaching us not only how to live and go back to Godhead, but how to live in this material world. And that Srila Prabhupada, who was Abhay Charan, fearless at the lotus feet, he was teaching us also to be fearless. That's such a wonderful personality, Srila Prabhupada is. One evening we got to go into the garden and sit with Srila Prabhupada while Shri Kirti read the Krishna book. And I didn't want this opportunity to go by without having an opportunity to ask Srila Prabhupada a question. But I didn't want to ask a stupid question. I thought and thought and thought, and because my father was a very strong Catholic, and he was particularly challenging to talk to. So I thought perhaps I'd ask Srila Prabhupada how to preach to Christians. And Srila Prabhupada was very quiet and kind of turned his head for a minute. And I was a little concerned that, oh, I did ask a stupid question and he's just going to ignore it. But he didn't. He then turned and he said, where are the Christians at 4:30 in the morning? How are they developing love of God? Then this turned out to be really an excellent point when I was speaking with my father, is that what is your process for learning love of God and developing love of God? And so in that way, Srila Prabhupada really helped me deal with my father very much. In my early years in the movement, I took care of the children a lot. And book distribution was a very big issue. So my parents gave me some money. I purchased a VW van. And there were a lot of matas, families joining with children. So I would take a couple of mothers and a box of books, and we would go to a park or a beach or something and let the children play. A couple of ladies would watch the children, a couple would distribute books. And this would also free up other mothers to go into service. One time a devotee came whose husband was a GBC, and she felt this was a waste of time and that we should just put the children in a room and let them color, give them some crayons, and one lady could take care of them. And I thought, oh, there goes our program, because she had more access to Srila Prabhupada, and I thought, oh, we're dead in the water. It's over. And, but the next morning in Srimad Bhagavatam class, Srila Prabhupada was giving a class, and he was talking about Krishna and Balaram and how every day they would go to the bank of the Jamuna and play. He says, and you also have the ocean here, and every day the children can play. So in that way, the issue never came up again, but the program continued on for some time. That was very sweet, because Srila Prabhupada, I felt this very deep connection, even though I didn't have a lot of access as far as when I first joined. I remember Gargamuni and Tamal Krishna saying, you know, you just can't go into Srila Prabhupada's. They were cutting that off. You couldn't just go to Srila Prabhupada's room. And the reason made perfectly good sense. Srila Prabhupada needed his time for translating these books, and we couldn't become a botheration to him. I never felt that I really needed to do that. I always felt that Srila Prabhupada has always been with me, and even to this day when I have a need for some understanding, I just pray to Srila Prabhupada, and he sends me the answers one way or another, usually through his books. Srila Prabhupada was so loving to the children, and they would dance in front of Srila Prabhupada ecstatically. And you could see sometimes Prabhupada would encourage them with his hand movements or his head, and he would smile at them, and you could see the children experiencing transcendental bliss. And then, of course, there was exchange when Prabhupada would give them a cookie. It was so sweet. But Srila Prabhupada, yes, he did care and loved the children very deeply. And you saw that in the exchanges with Srila Prabhupada, between him and the children directly. Srila Prabhupada was like a father to me, a loving father. Even though I have a father with a good relationship with my father, still, this relationship I had with Srila Prabhupada is very fatherly. And coming and sitting at his feet in the morning and listening to him. And sometimes Srila Prabhupada would tell stories, and he would get so animated. It's interesting because that story he tells about the mouse and the sadhu. And I remember one time when Srila Prabhupada told that story, and his face got so animated, and we were laughing, and he was laughing. And then another time he told the story, he was in a different mood, so he didn't want us to laugh. So it was interesting how Prabhupada could control the mood in the whole temple room very easily. Everyone was so tuned into him. There was another time when it was Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's disappearance day, and Srila Prabhupada had put his picture on the Vyasasana and did artik. And then he sat down and gave this beautiful lecture. And at the end of the lecture, he said that he didn't want to take sannyas. He wasn't really inclined. But his Guru Maharaj was encouraging him and wanted him to do it. And then Srila Prabhupada started to cry. And when Srila Prabhupada cried, everybody in the room cried. And I could feel big welts, trying to hold back so I could still hear what he was saying. And he said that, but now Srila Prabhupada has brought him so many sons and daughters. And he was very grateful. So at that time, everybody was just crying throughout the temple room. So grateful to have him as a father.
Je anilo premadana koruna prachu